So, ladies and gentlemen, nice to see you. I am Sandrine Dixson-Declève, co-president of the Club of Rome, and we are going to get the rest of this conference to meet us up here because we're going to kick some ass for the next hour and a half. We've got an amazing panel for you, but most importantly, I want to take you on the current roller coaster ride of reality. I want to take you down our pathways of how we can change the world. Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity. I'm going to show you a film, then I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of where we are today, and then I'm going to bring my unbelievable kick-ass panel up. And we're also going to have a bit of a musical tribute, which I'm going to be fully transparent, is going to be given by my lovely daughter, Tessa Dixon. So get ready for a good time. This is a session we're going to laugh, cry, and think together. Let's start with the film. Thank you.
The world has never been so rich, but we're still susceptible to shocks and crises. Can we build more resilient societies? Not utopian, but functioning and fair. This is the story of Earth for All. We assembled a group of economic thinkers and scientists and developed a computer model to test their big ideas. We then asked, what's possible in one generation? If we carry on as normal, population and material footprints continue to grow, particularly due to overconsumption in rich countries. The gap between the richest and everyone else widens. Social tensions worsen. Climate change impacts become ever worse. But what if the world takes a giant leap now, with 5 extraordinary turnarounds? In this possible and plausible future, all people can live a good life within safer planetary boundaries. We avoid the worst climate impacts. Poverty ends earlier. Population peaks lower. Well-being rises. Social tensions fall. Nature starts to heal. Incredibly, the investment needed is only 2 to 4% of global income. But we do need massive investments now, driven by governments on a clear mission to enact the turnarounds. Another big idea is a citizens' fund for each country, where companies pay to use our commons, the wealthiest contribute fairly, and the funds are distributed to all citizens equally. But rebooting economies won't happen on its own. We need a global movement, kicked off with worldwide citizens' assemblies. This is Earth for All. How the story ends is up to you. Join earthforall.life.
Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the escapade that we went down, myself and my colleagues and many others, to try to bring some hope to all of us, but also to understand reality, because we believe that Earth for All is both possible and essential. We have no choice. And I don't know why the clicker is not working. Next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen who are helping me with the technical aspects. There we go. Okay. But the thing is, let's be clear. This is not just some niche fantasy. We've even seen that at the World Economic Forum, most of the CEOs have rated that in the next 2 to 10 years, social and environmental tensions are going to be the most important point with regard to society and also business leadership. So how do we address the global risks that we know are hitting us today and plan for tomorrow? What does that look like when we take into consideration the major elephants in the room? Elephant number 1, our material footprint. A material footprint that we know is largest in the wealthiest countries, basically Europe, the United States, high-income countries. Elephant number 2, the percentage of CO2 emissions are coming from those countries. and it is the most vulnerable that are getting hit by most of the climate impacts. We know that our 10% of total lifestyle consumption emissions is only responsible by the poorest 50% of society. And here's elephant number 3, that those poorest 50% take less than 15% in total earnings, while the richest 10% take well over 40%. So within country wealth distribution, we see that this has been moving the wrong direction. We see that we have growing inequality and growing poverty across the globe at the same time that we have the compound effects of COVID, climate, and conflict. So what can we do? Well, first, we need to understand what is this obsession with wealth. Not only are we obsessed with wealth, but we are obsessed with consumption. And yes, we can see in this particular graph that life satisfaction is actually going down the wealthier you get. There is a ceiling of about $60,000 per annum. And then, having more doesn't necessarily make us more happy. So how do we contend with this? Our challenge is to understand how we can actually shift our economies to deal with this inequality, to bring people within a social equity system, and at the same time within the planetary boundaries. That's what we call the donut. This also means a dignified existence for most people, and you will see that this is fundamental. That transformational economics for the 21st century enables accounting for social and environmental risks. That this also expands our perspective of public goods and the global commons and takes them into account. That it corrects inequity and that it increases the agency of women and of workers. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that our economy is currently over-financialized. You can basically fire 10,000 people and your shares go up as a company. Shareholder value is the premise of today's economy. And yet our economy is supposed to service people. And now in particular, it has to service people, planet, and prosperity at the same time. So our analysis, what we're calling the spaghetti, is a series of these different interrelationships. Understanding the link between social tipping points, environmental tipping points, resource use, our financial system, our economic system, access to healthcare, etc., etc. And lo and behold, when we run the model, what do we discover? That the speed of action on planetary boundaries is a function of the speed of action on inequality and poverty. Working with Johan Rockström, who is the rock star in climate science, his aha moment was this: understanding that actually we will not meet our planetary boundaries, we will not meet our greenhouse gas emission objectives unless we deal with this very fact. So how do we do that? How do we do that when we know that we've got farmers in the street that are claiming for a fair price for their goods, who are saying now that they think that it is climate and green that is making their lives more difficult, and yet we know that that's a fallacy? What are the arguments that we need to come up with, the narratives that will bring more people on the journey? That is what Earth for All is about. Earth for All is about two key scenarios. The too little, too late scenario, which is the business as usual scenario, it's today's scenario, and the giant leap scenario. A giant leap scenario where societies are more resilient, where extreme weather events come and go without topping the entire nations, without conflicting people's own equity. This is what the giant leap is about. The giant leap is about a systems change agenda for well-being within the planetary boundaries. And through our analysis, in talking also to experts across the globe through our transformational economics commissions, we have come to 5 key turnarounds. Those 5 key turnarounds, as was said in the small film, basically will cost us 2 to 4% of GDP per annum. Probably much less than the defense budgets of a couple of countries. But what is so important about these 5 key turnarounds? These 5 key turnarounds look at poverty, empowerment, and inequality first, and then food and energy as key underbellies of change. Poverty, empowerment, and inequality means that we need to address that key elephant in the room. One, giving women more agency, in particular in countries where actually women are not even allowed to go to school. Ensuring that women are not only in board positions and enabled to have decision-making positions, but that in low-income economies, they are actually part of the society, not just a parallel economy. Ensuring that poverty is reduced inextricably, and ensuring that actually inequality, not only here in France or in the United States, where I grew up in San Francisco, and we see the highest homeless rate, we see the highest addiction rate, we see the highest mental illness and suicide rate, and yet we also see the highest wealth. Inequality is not just an issue between North and South. It is definitely an issue within our countries. So how do we deal with that? Because we know that if we don't deal with it, tension will increase. And we're seeing it now. Check out those farmers. They're getting pretty pissed. And so many others that are starting to say enough is enough. Oil and gas companies make 2.8 billion windfall profits per day on the back of energy poverty. That is the reality, ladies and gentlemen, at a time when actually just this past week in Texas, oil and gas producers said, gone is the age of renewables. We're going to continue pumping oil and gas because we feel that actually all we need to do is clean it up and it'll be fine. Even if they clean it up and even if we reduce our emissions from oil and gas, the problem is that none of that wealth is trickling down into people's pockets. Instead, people are getting increasingly more constrained. So social tension is fundamental. Social tension by 2030 will already start to be reduced if we move forward in the giant leap. And here is the key. Does anybody know, and now I've said it here, the difference between 1978 CEO salaries and now is 1,400%. Employee salaries are 18%. And in most countries, inflation is 30%. How is it that people will not start to get pissed off? They're starting to get pissed off now, and it's starting with the farmers. And it will be others, either in rural areas where they feel completely disenfranchised, or in urban areas where we know that, for example, the younger generation can't even afford to pay for housing, so they're all moving back in with their parents. This is the reality check. And inequality reduces trust. And because of this, it's playing out across Europe right now in terms of the European elections. This is the biggest year across the globe. 60% of citizens will go and vote. And here across Europe, we are seeing a drastic shift towards the right. Why? Because the right has used fear-mongering and has squeezed out to all of the citizens that somehow green is bad, climate is bad, transitioning is bad for you, and therefore we will protect you. This is a problem, and we must all make sure that we stand up and vote in the European elections to make sure that this doesn't happen. This is a 1930 situation, a pre-World War II situation. Can you please put the screen back up? Oh, it's still here. Last few points. 74% of G20 citizens would prefer a well-being economy. If you see here, our giant leap scenario enables, through those 5 key turnarounds, through a transfer of capital, enables us to move towards a well-being economy. That's 2 to 4% of global income, which is needed to invest in a better future, as I said before. So ladies and gentlemen, the faster we act, the better. We need to make sure that our current efforts are dramatically increased. We need to make sure that the reality check is felt, it's embodied. But that should not make us become ostriches. That should not make us freak out and think, this is too much for me. I can't do anything. Instead, let's prove Jane Goodall wrong. She has said, we, the human species, are the most intelligent, but they're not the wisest. I want all of us to show that we can both be wise and act at the same time and adopt an Earth for all so that people, planet, and prosperity can come together. This is a movement of movements. And so I'm going to ask already some of our panel to come up and to start to have a discussion on how can we all play this part. The first is Shiva Dosdar, because unfortunately, Marie Toussaint sent me a message last night and has been called to Amiens, where she and her colleagues are actually fighting because there is an announcement of a large closure of an industrial site. Shiva has been working with me at the EIB. She has 30 years of experience, give her a round of applause, in the area of innovative finance, and is very important in terms of the conversation around capital flows. The next person is Emmanuel Mussault from MOVIN'ON, who is coming up with collective solutions in the area of transport and mobility. Give him a round of applause. The next person is Adélaïde, who is both a climate activist and a youth activist, and a dear co-author in a book that we wrote together, Quel monde pour demain? And the last is my dear daughter, Tessa Dixson, who unfortunately, by playing football yesterday, has sprained her ankle, who will be bringing in the role of artists and of culture as a singer. So, let me start with you, Shiva. You and I have been working on climate action for quite some time, and also on the way in which we can translate not only Earth for All, but the need to shift through capital flows. The EIB is the climate bank, European Investment Bank, for those of you who don't know. You stood up to the plate already several years ago and said, we're going to do this. Where do you feel the greatest barriers and opportunities right now in terms of shifting? And talk a little bit about the reflection also around Earth for All.
Thank you very much, and it's wonderful to be on this particular panel. Obviously right now, the role of the EIB, I would say, is even probably more important than ever. As the Bank of the European Union, as a long-term investor in not only infrastructure, but also innovation. When it comes to climate change and the barriers, I think it is indeed in both areas. The investment needs are massive. And what you need is an anchor investor, a mission-oriented investor that very much has its, is sort of an anchor investor coming in early and providing that sort of patient capital that then can de-risk, can mobilize massive private investment. Because the main message I would like to leave is that in order to actually make sure that we are developing sustainable infrastructure, having the right climate solutions, and you have so many wonderful right now companies on the other side here, they need investment. But it's not just the private investment, it's not just the public investment like ours that comes in earlier on. we need to nevertheless set the stage and get the pension funds, get all that institutional money in there. And what
How do we do that?
And exactly. And what has now become the challenge is that, of course, and I think as you rightly point out, there is this backlash. There is, unfortunately, in a very polarized society that we have, a view that perhaps we now have more pressing issues. We are seeing the world as a bit like a Maslowian pyramid, perhaps, where, let's maybe first get to peace, let's maybe first defend ourselves. And I think, therefore, a lot of it is indeed in all of us realizing that we cannot sequence it. It's not a matter of now tackling this issue and then there may be the time for climate. The time for climate is very much now.
Yeah.
And I think to your point about, and that's why I'm really thrilled to be on this panel, it is indeed the voices that have not had yet, haven't been heard. Because unfortunately, we live in a world, and I would like to bring also Caroline Perez's Invisible Women quote in here. We live in a world, let's face it, built by men for men. We do absolutely need to build the world of the future for all of us, which definitely brings in the gender lens that we very often sort of just on the side in echo chambers mention. What it means is that we have to now look at an as inclusion as the driver. And I think bringing it up to the Earth for All book, I think the main message of that book is just so important that if you don't tackle poverty, if you don't tackle inequality, you will not get to there. So coming back to, therefore, the role of the public sector and an institution like ours is to ensure that, yes, that we do invest in social infrastructure, that we invest not only in the infrastructure, but also in the programs. And therefore, I will very briefly mention the role that I currently have at the EIB, which is heading the EIB Institute. We actually have 8 of our green heroes. You may see that they are sponsored by us. These are the green tech heroes. Please do pay them a visit. But what we do is we very much accompany companies early on, and some of the new initiatives that we have right now going on are indeed to give the next generation a voice. So youth engagement is absolutely critical, because an institution like the EIB that invests in projects for over 30 years, if we don't bring in the voice of the youth somehow into the governance, we have failed them. And the other thing, and we now have actually a woman President, Nadia Calvino, for the first time in our 65-year history. So, yes, who is very committed to really this inclusion angle and also women leadership. We do need to really make sure that the women voices are heard. And here I very quickly just say that we just launched a women climate network to just showcase how many women are already actively engaged in climate, so that anybody who tells you, well, we would love to have women voices, but there aren't just any around, you can point out to so many of them that are not only our network, but that are all over, many of them sitting in this
Great.
room.
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you on the point of what can we do to help the EIB to stay the course, because politically, and you have boards that are held, your board is also with member states. Many member states are making the decision right now to even protest against the European Green Deal. I'm not saying you are political, because we know that the EIB cannot be, but how can we support you? How can we bring the voices of all those that are here and also the economists and the scientists to keep the EIB on the right track? Because really, you have been our savior in this area for quite some time. So I'm not going to turn to a woman, I'm actually going to turn to a man. Emmanuel, I was actually told, by the way, that I needed to have more men on my panel. But I'm just going to say that, Emmanuel, it's a pleasure to have you as a feministic man. Can you talk to us a little bit about the role of moving on, and in particular shifting mobility? Because, as I said, we're getting full backlash from the fossil fuel industry. We're also, by the way, getting full backlash in terms of the automotive manufacturers in trying to delay the phase out and the ban of the diesel engine and the petrol engine, what we call the ICE, the internal combustion engine. How do we innovate in this area that's so important? And can you reflect a little bit also about public infrastructure? Because that also gives some ideas to the EIB.
Well, thank you, Sandrine. It's a great pleasure to be here. Great pleasure to be your male alibi for this discussion. First, let me give you a perspective on where I'll be talking from. Because as you mentioned it pretty clearly, it takes every single energy, all dimensions. It takes a global ecosystem to move things for the better. MOVIN'ON has established itself as an ecosystem, as a trustful and safe space where everyone, corporation, regulators, institutions are welcome to co-design, co-test, co-experiment solution for a more sustainable and desirable mobility for tomorrow. We are developing some what we call coalition of impact and propose solutions to mainly to the regulators. So in order to innovate for the better, we need to identify barriers of innovation, barriers of change. I would mention 4 of them. The one is about being ecosystemic. Although ecosystem, it's the most collective intelligence in nature, in life, when it comes to business, it's not natural to work on, within an ecosystem. Traditional business, as you know, is based on competitive advantage, so competition, more than on collaboration. So when I'm writing the two, we call it co-opetition. And where in the areas where corporations are competing, it's not our business. They are doing their business, and that's fine. Where they want to collaborate, then they come to us, and we work all together. Second, so ecosystem needs trust, and we all talk about creating impact. But it's still, I think we are half the way of defining what real impact is. Impact needs a different focal, and I think that's the barrier number 2.
So the first barrier is competition.
It's working in ecosystem.
Right.
It's collaboration where usually we used to compete. Having the right focal is, I think, is the barrier, or is challenge number 2. Creating impacts goes beyond your own activity. It even goes beyond your own ecosystem. It's E plus S plus G. It's not okay. It's fine to calculate your carbon footprint and so on, but you can have other positive externalities that you don't count, while you can have negative externalities that you will count twice, 3 times, and so on. So how to keep it global, how to keep it holistic. I can tell you on a personal basis, I've been very much inspired by medicine and by integrative medicine. In medicine, they have this focal, this holistic focal. I'm dreaming about maturing an integrative economy. That's what we are aiming for. Another challenge or barrier which has to be identified is changing mindset. But I think you introduced that as well. First of all, when it comes to mobility, the best way to address mobility is not to address mobility in itself. We used to say it's about going from A to B, but okay, we can improve it marginally, but how can we disrupt it with this? To me, mobility is about accessing to health, accessing to culture, accessing to education, accessing to work, accessing to nutrition. And if we give ourselves this wider perspective, there's lots of other approaches. Why not bringing knowledge education to us. Actually, what we learned from COVID with remote work is something different. I'm not saying we should change it all at once.
And then number 4, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the timing.
Yeah, number 4 is running the transition. And we are in between transition, and we know that transition is the most difficult time where traditional business is giving us return on investment, while new business is only bringing us uncertainty and investment. So how do we run this transition, and how do we get forward? I might get back on it.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the focus on creating these ecosystems and looking beyond mobility itself. I really appreciate that, and then shifting towards the transition. Adélaïde, what are some of your thoughts coming from the youth perspective, of course, but also your feelings of, I know in the conversations we have that things are not going fast enough.
It's obviously not a feeling, right? It's facts. It's not going fast enough. So I think first the challenges is very clear. We're not there, okay? All of this is very beautiful, but it's still theory. In practice, we are in a shit show. We are not making it, and so we have to be clear that whatever is on our ambition right now is still ambition.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Speaking truth to power. Oops.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. And then knowing also, and you know it, the reality that we are facing multiple crises, right? And we are just going to continue to face multiple crises. It's not going to stop. Like, we have seen it, we have heard it, we had COVID, we have our geopolitical tensions now. We have to face that. We have to take our responsibility there. But we cannot forget our long-term vision, right? So we need a political system where we are able to not only react to multi-crises, which are going to continue happening, but also with a long-term vision. And this is what's missing in the political level, right? On the political system, for that, I believe the best option and the best opportunity we have here is to reform this political system with the inclusion of citizens in a systemic way. And that's obviously also the inclusion of young people. It's what I've seen for the past 5 years. I've been so interested. I've been wanting to be included, not myself, but with the movement of young people, not only in Belgium, but across the world. We've said, you know what, we are in the streets because it's not going fast enough. Not only are we in the streets, we have ideas. We want to contribute. We want to be part of this change. But we are not included. So even if you have the will, you are excluded. So willing is not enough to be engaged in the change. We need structural place to make sure we are included, right? So those are the opportunities that we have to put in place. Our role, or my role that I see personally as a 23-year-old from Belgium, based in Brussels, with a climate movement, is that first, the climate movement should not only talk about climate. It's over. We said it, it's about a multi-crisis. We have to talk about structural change. So climate is one of it, it's part of it, but if you only see climate, you are going to fail your transition, right? If we're climate neutral in 2050, but with a social revolution and geopolitical tension across the world, we failed. So it's not only about climate, okay? And our opportunity and what we should do as young, but even citizens in general, is we have to hold people into account. This is our role, right? This is what we have to do. And to do that, we need to give the information. And that's the challenging part, is that we're not really aware, because we're not really included, we don't really know what's going on, right? We don't really know what we should target, who we can hold into account and for what. So this is the role we're trying to play in Belgium, right? It's trying to make this bridge between young people who are willing to get engaged, who are ready to contribute, and political institutions or private institutions, making sure that there is a constant pressure towards them. And for that, I'll just give a quick example. For example, on the CAP, the Common Agriculture Policy. This is super important because obviously with also the farmers' movement going on across Europe right now. The CAP was reformed a few years ago on the European level, right? And it's the biggest budget of the EU, right? So it's huge deal and huge amounts of money. right now, this this common agricultural policy is going one way, which is saying produce, produce, produce massively. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And on the other side, we are having a green deal, a green policy with the farm-to-fork policy, for those who are a bit experts into this subject here, who are saying, okay, but we have to do it differently, smaller farms, respect our land, respect farmers, and then that means that actually we do it differently. Those are two different objectives. It just doesn't work together. It's not possible, right? So today I believe we cannot face a transition without reforming the CAP. So anyways, in this context, we have been super active. It's super hard to understand, it's super complex, but we have amazing experts like Sandrine and others who are helping us to understand what's going on. And then we're using the democratic tools, which are not sufficient, but we're using the ones that we have access to make sure that we have a voice. So we stood in the middle of COVID every single day in front of the European Commission with activists there to demand to withdraw the cap and put one on the table that is aligned to the farm-to-fork policy. We have met commissioners constantly. We have brought farmers to also meet commissioners. We have failed, right? But you have to know that inside the European Parliament, they have used they have seen our movement. They have seen we were there. We were so huge that, I don't know, because it was COVID, so Twitter was super important. We were the top one hashtag on Twitter. Super crucial, because we need to be part of this subject, right? It's the only tool we have. So we were one of the main arguments in the discussion inside the parliament. And this is where we want to be. We want to be in part of that. So using that example to show you exactly, concretely, what we're trying to do. But now we have to do the same thing with reforming our economical system. Yes. But that's another subject. Right?
That's
we'll
another conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adé. Really appreciate. We really need to make sure that we continue to support the voice of youth. I mean, and not only the voice, but the intelligence. I mean, let's give another round of applause for all of the young men and women, especially women, that started the climate activism across Europe, and so many other women across the board. By the way, I just want to say conversations that I've had with these climate activists, with Louisa, who's coming as well from Germany, with Adélaïde, every single time they say to us, you know, we can go out without any risk to our lives, but the number of other women that are doing the same thing across the globe, who actually risk their lives every single day to fight for what they believe, including Indigenous women that are getting killed left, right, and center right now in the forests of Brazil and across Latin America and the Congo. So let's make sure that we remember to support these incredible young people. Now, Tessa, we have moved from public investment and the need to have strong institutional investment into mobility and creating ecosystems of mobility, into the importance of not tokenizing the youth voice and ensuring that we build movements. But to be frank, recently, we've seen the Taylor effect. The Taylor Swift effect has been phenomenal. And we know that we are not, exactly as Adé has said, getting to where we need to be in terms of bringing more people on the journey. How do we use arts and culture? How do we use performers like yourself, not only who embody the change, because you have reduced your consumption patterns, you do everything you can to be your own climate activists, but also to sing about the change, to talk about the change to people that we cannot reach.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And I think the main subject that really speaks to me is having a voice. I mean, we all kind of talked about it. And I think as a public figure, we have to use our platform to talk about these things and let the common person know what is happening. Let them convey a message and make a difference with how we say things and how we put things forward. Obviously, it can go through our art and through our music and through our platforms, but I think for me, I want to thank you for being such a powerful voice, especially in Belgium, coming from Belgium as well. We need people like you. We need women like you in our generation to embody the change. Because obviously, I think a lot of people, as myself, feel powerless in this system that has been built that kind of take advantage of us, in a sense. And the thing that I want to address is these systems can be brought down because they rely on us. We have the power, and we can change these systems by talking, engaging in conversations, going out in the streets. Can go into fashion as well. I mean, I'm wearing a brand, a French brand, emerging brand, that use recycled materials. And I think it's important to put art at the forefront of this movement as well. But basically, just everything comes together and saying we need to change now. It has to happen now, because if we don't, it'll be too late.
Thank you, Tess, for that very real message. And I appreciate the fact that you've brought in a brand, and we've got Nina out here, and an incredible fair, by the way. Any of you who are interested in fashion, go to London in June. Incredible sustainable textile fair, the best that I've been to, and I've been collaborating with Nina and her colleagues for quite some time. Really, it's important to walk the talk and to work with some of the biggest fast fashion producers to really shift them, while we also speak to them about what we think is the future. Now, I want to take all of us into that moment of hope, but also the moment of despair. Because, to be fair, those of us who work in this area constantly vacillate between despair and hope. And I brought Tessa to the stage, apart from the fact that I'm incredibly proud of her as a mother, but more because I'm proud of her in the fact that she's embodied some of the things that I've been trying to instill in myself and my family into her own art. But she also talks about the hurt. We need to talk about the hurt. I was actually taking a Eurostar to Paris 3 weeks ago, and a man that was sitting to my right turned to me and said, "You may not remember me, but I actually have come to several of your presentations and have been so inspired by you that I brought my daughter to your presentation a year ago, and she actually has become increasingly a climate activist." But then he started crying. He started crying because she had given up. And she'd been checked into a hospital because she tried to take her life. This is the flip side of the hard work that we have every single day. This is the flip side of the growing climate anxiety, the growing mental illness. And thank God both myself and Adélaïde were able to support her when we found out that she was so troubled. We have to build a community of hope. It is our responsibility to cry together, to fight together, and to build the future together. So what I want to do is listen to this incredible song that Tessa just released, that I hope will then bring us into just some closing remarks about how do we vacillate, but also how do we steer ourselves through that roller coaster of life today, which is so incredibly fucking hard. Excuse my language. Can we put on the music, please?
The streets of town blue, just puppets used to mourn. I feel as though I can't help myself from caving in. And I find the truth in all the beauty that we're meddled in. It's the essence it all. I just don't know what makes me me anymore. And I hate that. I don't find any excitement in anything. I'm drained. I'm so tired all the time. And I've lost myself. I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. I can't help myself from caving in. And I find the truth in all the beauty that we're meddled in. Don't be scared, open your eyes. The ride is a delight. It's all there to fantasize. If you know how to follow the light, if you twist and turn in the wild, yeah, you know you'll arrive. Heaven is a place on earth. Do you wanna give it? Heaven is a place on earth. Heaven is a. Heaven is a. Heaven is a.
So sometimes when we can't help ourselves from caving in, we have to remember that actually, yes, heaven is a place on earth. And that's why I think these lyrics are so important. When we see testosterone-induced rides to the moon, mostly done by men, by the way, that money could be channeled into the planet because it is the earth that should be our mission, not the moon. We have to remember that heaven is earth. And we need to protect that. So I guess I'm going to ask the three of you just a few thoughts on what you do not to fall into despair. What made you think as you were listening to this song, what were you thinking about? Maybe I'll start with you, Adi.
Thank you. Just thank you so much, Tessa, for the song and for your work. And I love your music. So really, thank you. It's really good, and it represents a bit like obviously what we're all feeling, and we all have our journeys there. But I think it's really important to feel what we feel when we are like when we want to cry, when we're so mad. And for me, I've been so engaged, and maybe I'm so much in my activist bubble that I don't know, like if tomorrow the parliament doesn't vote on a policy, I could cry over that. Yeah. Which sounds crazy, but it's true. Like I think being an activist or being so far into engagement, trying to make it sustainable, can only happen if you put yourself in a very vulnerable position. And if you don't feel what's happening really deep inside, like deep in your core, I don't think you can sustain your engagement. Because I think it's in those moments when you cry, when you're so mad, that you can only transform that energy afterwards into engagement. And then your engagement is not because facts and because we're now at 1.5 degree warming of the planet. Okay, no, but I don't know what that means concretely, but I feel it now. And that gets me so mad that then I transfer my energy. And I think it's important to say that I am able to transfer this sadness and angerness into action thanks to a collective, thanks to the fact that I'm not alone. I would never do it alone. I would literally stay in my bed. But the fact that there are friends who are there, okay, today you're the depressed one, no problem, I take you out of bed, let's go. Tomorrow it will be there, and I'll take them out of bed, right? And then we're organized. That's super important, the organization part, right? Organizing small, big, whatever, get going with a project that goes much beyond your individual self. Like, obviously, you don't change the world alone. You don't even change anything alone. I don't even know if you can change yourself alone, right? But with others, it's crazy how much we can do and how much power we can have. And I think this transition moment, when we're not alone, when friends come over, when you're building this project that goes beyond yourself, and you don't even realize the impact that you have, right? Because I think activism is all about throwing seeds out there, and you never know if the tree was planted or not. You never know if it grew, right? Just hope it did. And if you have that mentality, I think it works. And that's the way I get over my sadness.
Beautiful, thank you. And let's remember that those seeds are then planting roots and foliage and tree trunks and anchoring us. And it's so important. That anchoring is fundamental. I've got it here, thank you. Quick, Shiva, just a quick thought.
Well, I mean, I was thinking, I feel so blessed that I have, within the bank, come into a role that very much is in alignment with my own values at the Institute, as I mentioned, where, in fact, one of the activities is promoting artists, helping artists have a voice in our society. So I was listening to you and thinking, my God, we need to do so much more for the artists, and perhaps really to tie it in with, then again, also the bank as an investor. Please, I think you were asking earlier, what can you do? Well, what you can do is certainly all of those who work on projects that need financing, make sure you know about all the various pools of financing that is actually around and available to you, whether it's at the European Commission, under the European Innovation Council, whether it's EIB. And if you're not sure, reach out to us. We have an advisory area that can help you. I would also like to get to very briefly say to those of you who are either philanthropists or corporates, you have a very important role to help the innovators, either as the anchor customer or as that philanthropic money that can come in early on when they're trying to get sort of become investment ready. So what I would like to say, generally, EIB is an important player in here, but we need to work together. So do reach out to us. And the Institute is definitely the heart of the organization. So if you have anything that touches on youth, if you're a youth or an artist, please do reach out to the Institute, because that's where we can work together.
You know what I've been amazed by is that through the work that we've been doing at the Club of Rome and my work in facilitating difficult conversations, we've created circles of trust between institutions. And it is phenomenal to see the number of people in institutions, whether it be the European Commission, the Parliament, the EIB, the European Central Bank, who, when they are allowed to feel and express their worry, are then much more open to collectively working together in terms of solutions. It's hard being inside, by the way. Those of us who have been inside, I worked for the oil and gas companies, I put my hand up, it's not easy. But there are always, in every single oil and gas company, in every single institutional framework, there are change makers who feel alone, change makers who need a home, where they can actually come with others and be part of that collective. So we need the collective outside, and we need the collective inside. But we also need the inner dimension. And I know, Emmanuel, that you've also been a path, like I have, on creating that inner dimension. So how did this speak to you?
Well, thank you, Tessa. Thank you, Sandrine. It's so rare that you give us the opportunity to express emotion in such a stage. I think it's even unique. It's the first time, as far as I can remember. By the way, at MOVIN'ON, we created 2 years ago Mobile standing for Moving On Board of Young Leaders. It's a collective of young people. The claim, the promise was very simple, is how to transform eco-anxiety into collective and positive impact. How to have your guts, your heart, and not only your brain expressing and acting. I think this is a strong power from the younger generation. This is a lot that you have to learn to teach us. And since you are inviting me to put a very, very personal expression, I'll do it. For 3 years, I was left by doctors with two words which made me crazy for 3 years. There was fight and acceptance. To me, fight was about winning, acceptance was... And then I realized that life was one. Life was one inside and outside, like all ecosystem. And it also takes not only your brain, your expertise, but your emotion, your guts, to make it happen collectively. And I want to end by one thing. It's not the youth against the elder and so on. It's the key is making it intergenerational, like we are trying to bring new data in an old software. You are coming up with a new software, and all together, hopefully, we can dream about a better future.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to finish this incredible session. I promised you a roller coaster. I hope that it wasn't too difficult, and I hope that you felt empowered and interested by what we said. Earth for All, as I said, is a movement. It's a movement built on bringing in your head, your heart, your soul, and your legs to kick some ass. And I mean that. It's not going to be easy. We do need to cry together, but we need to fight together. And that does mean finding solace in groups where you can really feel the strength to move on. So I hope that through this session, as you move through all of these different exhibits, that you ask questions. Do not allow this to be about a future scenario. This is about today and creating the alternative futures that we need now. There are books just behind here. I'm going to go and sign some if you want to join me. We've translated our book in terms of 10 different languages, including in Chinese. And we would really love you to join the movement. You don't have to buy a book necessarily. But I hope that we've somehow inspired you today. And I hope that we will meet again somewhere in this beautiful earth that we call heaven on earth. Thank you.